这两天不是新完上课，连暖气都没有。
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to continue our discussion about the First Amendment to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Today specifically we're going to start to talk about the Establishment Clause. It's one of the two clauses in the First Amendment dealing with freedom of religion, or perhaps you can describe it as freedom from religion. On Monday, we discussed the Free Exercise Clause and the general rules that apply when individuals wish to practice their religion and that religious practice or conduct is burdened or conflicts with a law passed by the government. Does the government have to create an exemption for religious practices, a special Jewish sect? And they allowed that small community with that one particular religion to elect their own school board members and control their own public schools. It gave them special treatment, a special school district for that religious group. Everyone else went to other school districts. Was that a violation of the Establishment Clause? Yes, because it is choosing to favor one religion over the other religions, and it is favoring one religion over non-religion, atheism, the rejection of religion. Other people do not agree with that. Okay, what if I am the public school board and I pass a new law? I say, in order for us to understand literature, written works, you need to read the New Testament Bible, the Christian Bible. You must read the Old Testament, the Jewish Bible. Different things get complicated. Perhaps they get complicated, perhaps they get interesting. Depends on your perspective. But depending on the judge and the facts and the philosophy of the judges, different tests might apply to determine whether or not that school district's decision to require all of those books as part of its literature courses, whether that violates the Establishment Clause or not. How do we look at this? Well, your book does a very good job of explaining the three main theories of Establishment Clause analysis. And judges tend to agree on one or the other. Now we start first with the idea of strict separation to enforce this one. Is there more enforcement for that type of law compared to others? It's going to depend on your interpretation of excessive entanglement. How much entanglement is excessive? Is this excessive entanglement like paying teacher salaries, having to monitor what day did you teach, what class? How many times did you teach math versus how many times did you teach about the Bible? That kind of thing. You can see, again, we're starting to get fuzzy. We're starting to get confused and vague with these rules. How are we going to apply it? You can see how the result changes depending on your rule, depending on your theory. There's no clear answer, yes or no. It will depend. Okay, let's go to the next one. People join the military and they're sent to places like Iraq. Many of these people are Christian and they want to practice their Christian faith on Sunday. They cannot go to church in Iraq. So the military hires priests as part of military services and sends them to Iraq to help the soldiers pray. Strict separation, does it violate strict separation? Yeah, because the government is hiring priests, paying for them. They're employees now. Probably violates strict separation. How about endorsement? Would a reasonable person think this is an endorsement? It's going to depend on the facts, maybe. Is it just priests? Or also Protestant ministers? Also Jewish rabbis? Maybe a Muslim imam? Are you hiring also psychologists? People who can give emotional counseling without religion? It depends on the facts. What if I told you this was a tradition going back 200 years? Back to the Revolutionary War, we had ministers on the battlefield. Okay, starting, maybe an informed person wouldn't think it's so bad. Still not clear though. What about here? Accommodation. Is it okay under accommodation theory? Probably, yeah. You're not forcing anyone to do it. You're just offering services. If you want to talk to our history and our authority and legitimacy as a nation, just like we refer to God in the Declaration of Independence to help justify the Revolutionary War. So an informed observer would have some idea of history and context that the average reasonable observer may not. Okay, so more willing to forgive government conduct. Are there any questions about neutrality before we know how this works? The most important thing to remember about neutrality is the use of this endorsement test. And we'll talk in a minute about Allegheny County, which uses it. The third and final theory that we're going to talk about is accommodation theory. And accommodation theory is now becoming more important because we have two new judges to the Supreme Court. And people suspect that these two new judges, Roberts and Alito, that they might be in favor of this theory. Violate strict separation. Should we change these traditions? The other problem with strict separation is Thomas Jefferson himself and many of the other framers, the founders of the country. It is Thomas Jefferson who's talked about a wall of separation, but it's also Thomas Jefferson who wrote the Declaration of Independence. A lot of people like endorsement tests. Who wants to tell me why they like endorsement tests? Why is this so nice? Any volunteers?
This test is too strict. In this, I think it's almost impossible that the government not interfere, entangle with the religion. It's almost impossible. And here, this several elements, and especially the endorsement test, that it seems it's from the reasonable observers' perspective. I think it's much more acceptable.
So this is too strict, this is too loose, this is just right. We are going to pay for the secular education, the secular teachers, even if secular teaching is in a religious school, like math, pay for all math teachers. Is there a secular purpose? Yeah, you want to pay for secular math. What are some examples of religious discrimination? How can you tell if the government is discriminating between religions? Well, let me try to give you an example. Let us assume that a school board decides, it's a public school board, state action, and they decide that they want everyone in school to study the Christian Bible. It's important to understand the Christian Bible to understand our culture in America. That is what they say. Most forgiving of a government action or law that is related to religion. And at the very beginning, the accommodation theory accepts the very basic idea that no, we cannot have an American church. The government cannot create an official church for the nation. There can't be a national church from the government. But they go beyond that and say, in addition to no church, you cannot coerce. You cannot force people to practice or believe or participate. You cannot compel or coerce religious practices. This idea of coercion. We don't want the government to force you to do something you don't want to do because it's religious. But the question in accommodation theory is, what is coercion? How much pressure is coercive? Is it simply pressure based on context, like the Lee versus Wiseman case?